Welcome back, my lovely friends. Today I'm leaning into the gentle side of creativity, the part that invites us to slow down and let wisdom arrive in its own time. And that is exactly what we are exploring with our Dephemerember prompt today: leaves, envelope and owl. So let's see what we will create today. Gathering my materials always sets the tone. Old dismantled envelopes, my jelly print, my vibrant little family of acrylic colors, the envelope and real dried leaves I received from Gem at Gem's creative space, my lovely swap partner for Dephemerember this year. And then I have this beautiful owl print from the Digital Collage Club. Setting it all up feels like a small ritual of preparing myself, not just the table. I could have easily used one of the altered envelopes from yesterday's session, and I will do for a later prompt, but today I felt that spark to pull out my jelly plate and play with my bright colors again. You can never have too many altered envelopes in your stash, especially with this year's Dephemerember theme of compartmental making. Every little piece becomes a seed for something later. But before I begin printing, I take a moment to prepare the envelopes. I pull out a roll of washi tape that usually just sits in my drawer, one of those patterns I never reach for, and suddenly it becomes useful. That's the funny thing about crafting. The supplies we almost never use often end up being exactly what we need in moments like this. Covering the clear envelope windows feels like a good start. A practical step, but also oddly soothing. There's something very enjoyable about doing these gentle preparations. Protecting the window so it stays clean later, smoothing down the tape, adjusting the edges. These small motions feel like the warm-up before the creativity really begins. And I'm reminded as I place the tape carefully here over the window how often we need to create little boundaries for ourselves. A way of saying this part needs protection. This part will make sense later. Even in life, some areas just need to be shielded for a moment while everything else gets messy around it. It's not dramatic, it's not complicated. It is just a moment of care. And sometimes that is what wisdom looks like too. Quiet preparation, small steps, making room for what is coming next. So let's do some jelly printing. Oh, I love this process. It's always so curious to me. There's a kind of magic in not knowing exactly how each print will turn out. Even when you use the same paint color, the same brayer, the same pressure, no two pulls are ever the same. Every print is unique. Every layer interacts with what came before it. And it reminds me that wisdom does not come in straight lines or predictable patterns either. It layers itself. It changes depending on the moment, the mood, the history we bring into the day. Insight often appears in patches, not in perfect clarity. Just like these envelopes will become patchy, grungy, textured little stories. So, as I roll out the colors, I'm reminded that creativity has its own pace. You cannot hurry a print. You cannot force a color to behave. You have to let the process be what it is. And the same is true for emotional clarity. We want answers often quickly. We want the insight right now. But wisdom rarely blooms under pressure. It grows in the quiet, in the repetition, in the trust that something meaningful is forming, even when it looks messy at first. So, working in layers like this is almost meditative. A little pink here, a little turquoise there, the softest green pushing through. Overlapping colors that catch each other in unexpected ways. And as I build layer on layer, I think about how much of our personal understanding is layered too. We grow because of things we learned long ago, and things we discovered yesterday, and things that suddenly clicked this morning while brushing our teeth. Wisdom is not a single event. It is the accumulation of small realizations, stacked gentle on top of each other, just like these prints. Some layers look messy at first. Some do not feel like they belong. Some feel too bold, too bright, too strange. But then the next layer settles over them and somehow it makes sense. We do not have to know the purpose of each color while we are still applying it. The meaning comes together later, just like our lives. There's something really satisfying about peeling off this washi tape after everything has dried now. It feels so nice to see the little window appear again. It somehow reminds me of those moments in life where something that felt confusing starts to make a tiny bit more sense again. Not in a big dramatic way, just in a quiet, there it is. And as I peel the tape away, step by step, I notice how familiar this feels from my work too. So often people try hard to make themselves understand everything at once, to figure things out quickly. But our minds just do not work that way. Clarity usually shows up when we make a little space for it. The window was always here. Nothing was wrong with it. I had just covered it under several layers of paint, which, if I'm honest, is something we all do sometimes. We get busy, we get stressed, we overthink, and suddenly things we used to see or feel clearly are covered over and are harder to access. So, peeling this back slowly feels a bit like choosing to look underneath something gently. Not ripping things open, just seeing what is there when we feel ready. And I like that. It feels honest. It feels kind, and moments like this often teach me as much as the formal stuff ever did. Maybe that is why I enjoy it so much. It's such a tiny action, but it holds a real truth. When we give ourselves even a small moment to settle, we often find that the clarity we thought we lost was simply sitting underneath the layers we had put on top. And yes, of course, I keep the printed washi tapes. They feel like little souvenirs from the whole process. Each one catches a bit of the colors, a bit of the mood of the printing session today. They may look like scraps, but to me they hold tiny echoes of what the day felt like. The brayer papers do the same thing for me. They are always messy and imperfect and somehow full of life. I look at them later and think, that was actually quite lovely. It's funny how often the things we think will not matter end up being the things we reach for again. And here they are, my final envelopes. Like, they are messy, they are unique, they are bold, they are loud, and I suppose that mirrors people too. The parts we think are too messy or not worth mentioning often turn out to be the most real, the most alive. That reminds me that when someone in therapy says, "This probably isn't important," that is so often the moment where something true begins to unfold. Those little side comments, the unpolished moments, the things we almost skip past. So, saving these bits feels natural to me. It feels like saying, I see you. You happened for a reason. And I kind of love that crafting teaches this in such a gentle way. The pieces we nearly tossed out end up becoming the ones that pull a whole page together later. And the same goes for us. The quieter parts, the in-between parts, the things we think do not count, the messy parts, they often turn out to be the pieces that help us understand ourselves most honestly. And there's something comforting about that. especially on days where we are just rolling paint around and chatting with a friend. As I start cutting out these little owl squares, I cannot help smiling at their faces. Each one has such a different expression. Some look thoughtful, some a bit cheeky, and some have that calm, steady gaze that owls seem to be born with. They feel like quiet companions to the process, almost like they are keeping an eye on things while I work. And while I trim around the edges, I notice myself slowing down. There's something about working with small images that invites a gentle pace. It gets me thinking about how often we try to make sense of things quickly in our own lives. We want answers now, insights now, clarity on demand. But in my experience, the moment of real understanding usually arrives when we are not pushing so hard. They show up when the noise drops a little and we have a bit more room inside to hear ourselves. Owls seem to understand that naturally. They wait, they notice, they trust the timing of things. And it is a nice reminder for me too, while I sit here tearing the corners of this little image, that wisdom often comes in its own slow, steady way. This part is one of my favorites, just layering everything out and seeing what wants to sit together. The envelopes, the little owls, and these beautiful dried leaves that Jem sent. There's no real plan here, just a slow matching of colors and textures until something feels right. It's not a thinking process, it's more of a feeling process, letting my hands lead instead of my head. The leaves always add something grounding. They bring it in that sense of season turning, of how natural it is to shed things when we are ready. Trees never force themselves to hold on. They just let go when the moment comes. And I think about that a lot, especially when life feels busy or overwhelming. Letting go is not a dramatic act. Sometimes it is just a quiet readiness. And the owls, well, they seem to fit right into that atmosphere. They have that knowing look, as if they understand the whole story without needing to say anything at all. Now I'm flipping through my junk journal planner, just seeing where one of these envelopes might want to live. And it always makes me laugh a little because it really does feel like the pieces choose their spots. I can have an idea in my head and then the paper in my hand says, no, actually, I think I belong over here. And when that happens, I have learned to trust it. Sometimes something just feels right long before I could explain why. So I hold a few pages open, move the envelopes around, tilt them this way and that, and wait for that little inner yes. It is a quiet feeling, but it is reliable. It is the same kind of feeling you get when something in life finally lines up a bit, even if the reasoning comes later. We recognize the fit in our bodies before our brains have found the language for it. When I finally land on this envelope, the idea comes very naturally, almost softly. The window wants to become a pocket, and I love that. A window turned into a place that holds things. It feels like a gentle shift in purpose, almost symbolic in its own small way. A reminder that parts of us can change what they are meant for too, without losing anything. Some things inside us want to be seen clearly and openly. And some things want to be held quietly for a while. It makes sense to me that both can live in the same space. So, I mark the envelope down here on the page and think, yes, this is where it belongs. So, off camera, I have stitched the pocket with that decorative leaf stitch again. It feels like a sweet little echo of the whole theme. Leaves holding a leaf. It is simple, but it really does make me smile. There's something about stitching that always feels reassuring to me. Maybe it's the rhythm of it, maybe it's the way it shows up in quiet repeating lines. Stitch by stitch, it turns a loose idea into something sturdy enough to hold things. And as someone who listens to a lot of emotional stitching in my work, I think that it is why I like it so much. It mirrors how we hold ourselves together in small ways. Not through big dramatic actions, but through these tiny, steady moments of care that add up over time. Nothing forced, nothing rushed, just a gentle line doing its job. After I have inked all the edges, slowly going around, I am now gluing my pocket down, losing my art glitter glue. What I usually do or often do with pockets is that I am just gluing on the three sides. That's why I started doing it like this here. But today I decided I would like to glue the entire pocket down because the paper of the envelope is a little bit fragile, so I don't want to go have things going in and out and ripping the paper. So with that I'm giving it this sturdiness. So, and when I place the leaf and the owl on top of Gem's dried leaf, it suddenly looks like it has settled onto its own little branch. It's such a small thing, but it gives the page this quiet woodland feeling that makes me want to breathe a bit deeper. It feels peaceful, it feels grounded, and so I glue down the leaf here gently, making sure not to cover too much of the window, but let the whole scene come together in its own time. So, by the time the stitching, the leaf and they all are all in place, the pocket has its own tiny world, a bit of nature, a bit of color, and a bit of story. And that's the part of journaling I love the most. These small pieces that somehow hold a whole atmosphere. So, I'm finishing off today's page by adding a take I have from a previous project, and this is our finished project for today's prompt. Here it is, the finished side, the little tag held here in the pocket, the owl overlooking everything. So, and as I show you the leftover brayer pages, the painted washi tapes, the envelopes that I have now in my stash, I'm reminded how nothing in a project like this really goes to waste. Even the small scraps seem to find their purpose somewhere down the line. And I suppose life is a lot like that too. The moments we think are small or unimportant often shape us quietly in the background. A conversation we barely remember, a tiny decision that softens something for us, a moment of rest we needed more than we realized. They all add up. They all become part of the bigger picture we carry forward. So as this little page comes together, I hope it brings you into a slower rhythm too. The kind where you can breathe a little easier and just let things unfold at their own pace. We do not need to force clarity. We do not need to rush insight. Sometimes just sitting still with ourselves is enough.